I think that's a really, it's kind of a really high skill cap strategy because it's very easy to just do a lot of nothing when you're doing the fake out cycling with Gastrodon, but actually catching the Incineroar turn 1, King Gambit and Electabuzz, the two different Pokemon on Pedro's side, will be the leads up against Juan leading the Incineroar and Volcarona. So King Gambit does immediately get a boost, but unfortunately for it, even though it has the boost, it's facing down both an Incineroar and a Volcarona.
Yeah, and if the Volcarona goes for Fairy Terra, suddenly you've got two Pokemon that resist the Dark type attacks, right? So
Which is all King Gambit has.
Exactly. This is one of the interesting things about King Gambit. So it's like, okay, it has this attack boost, but like, you know, a +1, even Dark Terra, Kowtow Cleave, or Sucker Punch isn't doing like the most amount of damage here. But there is a lot of really good offense here in the back, and so we're going to just see a pivot out immediately.
Yeah, the Electabuzz knows that it can't protect the King Gambit with Follow Me because of the Heat Wave on the Volcarona. So immediately switching out, and the Fake Out connects on King Gambit. No Swords Dance. The only dancers allowed here at the Latin American International Championships are our Samba dancers from the opening ceremony and Juan's Volcarona.
Yeah, that's a really safe play for Juan to make, and ends up getting just a lot of value out of it, right? The Electabuzz there doesn't actually put on too much pressure. It's mainly valuable for that Follow Me. You do have Taunt as well, but I would expect the Volcarona to be faster than the Electabuzz.
Yeah, slow Taunt's just not working on Volcarona.
Exactly, yeah. And so by being able to get that Quiver Dance up, this is huge, right? Like, Volcarona is set up. I thought this would be very much the battle of the Volcaronas here, but it looks like Pedro is actually dropping that Volcarona. One interesting thing here, though, is with Sneasler out in the field, Volcarona is in a tricky spot where you pressure with, you know, your dark type attacks like Sucker Punch. Like we're seeing a potential hover here. And Sneasler can Dire Claw. So it's saying if you go for that Terra, I'm going to punish you. But if you don't go for that Terra, I still get the Sucker Punch off. But the Protect here comes out, baiting out the double up into that spot.
Yeah, Juan using the offensive pressure of a boosted Volcarona to get Pedro to double target the Volcarona, meaning that Juan just gets to do whatever he wants with this Incineroar, and that's going to be a big Flare Blitz into the Sneasler, not targeting down the King Gambit, but instead good damage onto the Sneasler and breaking the Focus Sash. Now, Volcarona is well on its way to feeling pretty good about this turn.
Yeah, Juan's in such a good spot now because you do pressure with Fairy Terra Heat Wave from this angle, right? With that speed boost, you are outspeeding everything from Pedro's end, presumably, and so that's a great protect, right? Like, I think recognizing, hey, like, he does have this relatively safe play of Sucker Punch, Dire Claw. Incineroar, of course, is exposed to a close combat there, so Pedro could have just gone for it, but Juan saying, you know what, like, I think I have a lot of offensive pressure. Now I think it's very safe to Terra the Volcarona. I think the main thing that you have to be a little bit scared of is potentially missing that Heat Wave, but Heat Wave looks so good right now.
Absolutely. Heat Wave is looking great on this Terra Fairy Volcarona. Goes ahead and gets the terrestrialization underway. Pedro will have to protect King Gambit to try and survive another turn here. The Volcarona goes for the Heat Wave, protect into the King Gambit, but will be able to land on the Sneasler and pick up that KO. So now the Incineroar will be able to fire off probably another Flare Blitz here, or maybe a knockoff, but it doesn't matter because that King Gambit is safe and sound behind the Protect. But Juan in a huge advantage here. Just the Electabuzz and Dragonite in the back, and that is bad news for Pedro.
Yeah, and you can see why we were talking about Fairy Terra so much, right? Like, what does Dragonite gonna do? The best it can angle for is Haze to actually get rid of the boosts on Volcarona, but then you'd also get rid of King Gambit's attack boost as well. And Volcarona right now, not only is it so strong offensively, but it's great defensively as well, right? Like, you just are not taking very much damage from Sucker Punch, Kowtow Cleave, and so Pedro here could go for the Dark Terra to try to survive the Heat Wave. Might be bulky enough to survive anyway, depending on how these Pokemon are trained, but okay, it's the hover for Dark Terra. It's just, it's a +1 Black Glass's Sucker Punch, but it's not going to knock out. I guess you could maybe try to go for Sucker Punch and Extreme Speed onto the Volcarona, but looks like Pedro's actually hovering the Swords Dance option. The idea is to try to survive the turn, then +3 Sucker Punches will be able to get the knockout.
Yeah, here comes the terrestrialization for the pure Dark typing on King Gambit, reducing the damage from a Heat Wave, but now making it weak to the Terra Fairy, Terra Blast. The Dragonite still has multi-scale intact, so likely would be able to survive a single Terra Blast coming out from the Volcarona. That Extreme Speed actually did good damage here. Here's the Volcarona, went for a Heat Wave, and it missed the King Gambit. That's
double dodge!
Why did you mention all of the Heat Wave misses,
I told you! Oh no! and the Swords Dance comes out. So I think that turn, Juan had the option of going for Terra Blast Flare Blitz into King Gambit. That way you don't deal with accuracy. And if King Gambit doesn't Terra, well, I think the Flare Blitz should finish it off. And if you do Terra, then the Terra Blast deals super effective damage. But it's a nightmare miss there, as now this King Gambit at +3 attack hasn't taken any damage. It is so much scary. And that's what I was saying coming into this matchup. Juan's Volcarona is cursed.
You gotta hit those heat waves. And that Volcarona actually took good damage from the extreme speed as well. Of course, with Leftovers recovery and the ability to stall out with Protect, Volcarona will be able to heal up quite a bit. But yeah, going for that heat wave there may be a little bit risky. In fact, no Protect coming out.
Yeah, he read the Protect, so it's just Terra Blast. It could have been Sucker Punch and Extreme Speed into that spot. +1 Terra Blast here into the King Gambit. There's no Sucker Punch, so King Gambit just fades.
King Gambit goes down. Juan makes the adjustment. You know what can't miss? Terra Blast. Let me click the 100% accurate move. Get that King Gambit off the floor. And Incineroar adding insult to injury. Now getting the parting shot off onto Dragonite, dropping the attack. We'll be able to switch back out and be able to switch back in and get another Intimidate down onto that Dragonite, making that Pokemon so weak against this this Terra Fairy Volcarona. Just the Electabuzz in the back for Pedro. Nothing really that Pedro can do here. Juan just deciding which of the two Pokemon that are unrevealed will I show for game 1.
Yeah, totally. I think this game is over at this point, and despite the double Heat Wave miss, Juan decides to find this really risky play of just going for Terra Blast. Of course, Volcarona at that point, vulnerable to a +3, Black Blast is Dark Terra, Sucker Punch. I think he would knock out the Volcarona, and so I think Dragonite also just in such a tough spot already before that turn even, because you already had your loaded dice knocked off as well. And so it just doesn't really do that much. That game basically needed to all be about the King Gambit after it got that Swords Dance boost. And so Extreme Speed's going to come out now. But yeah, Volcarona's just not taking very much damage. And this Electabuzz just not really that valuable in this game. Like it was able to go for a follow me, but like this is what we're saying. This Heat Wave with that Volcarona can often ignore it. But here content to just go for the Terra Blast, saying, you know, like I just need to get one more knockout essentially to win the game. Look how much that does, and then we'll see a Dire Claw follow up. Does that get the knockout? It does not, but I mean, this Volcarona is still just looking so strong.
Yeah, this Volcarona has taken control of the game, and that's only after one Quiver Dance. Juan only needed the one turn to get that Quiver Dance off on Volcarona, and then the pressure of the combination Heat Wave and Terra Fairy Terra Blast meant that there was really nothing that Pedro could do with the 4 Pokemon that he brought. Getting those Heat Wave misses were really crucial to getting Pedro back in the game, but then just played a little bit too passively there, because Juan, after those Heat Wave misses, was in a really bad spot, made the call that he needed to go aggressive, can't just be trying to protect the Volcarona, and needed to get a call right. Did, knocked out the King Gambit, now it's knocked out the Dragonite, and it's just the Electabuzz up against these 2 Pokemon that the Electabuzz can't do anything about. And it can survive for a turn with the Protect, but that's all it can do.
Yeah, and you know, I think Pedro was probably feeling like he was still behind in this game anyway, despite that Swords Dance, and you know, Volcarona could Quiver Dance or Protect on that turn. Like, surely it's not going to just attack in front of a Sucker Punch, right? And so there's a lot of mind games, and I think it speaks to the difficulty of using King Gambit effectively, because especially when you're up against a player as strong as Juan, right? Juan making the read and just making that hard call out. So great recovery despite a double Heat Wave miss in the middle of that game. And I wonder if Juan's thinking, you know, I could have just Terra Blast and Flare Blitz. I think that was a relatively safe option in that scenario. But I think the idea, behind the Heat Wave is it just does so much damage. It's so tempting to click, right? And so it's something you have to think about once this Volcarona is set up. But I think like the Volcarona was just such a huge issue that entire game. So how does Pedro deal with it now is the question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's going to be something that Pedro's going to have to think very carefully about. One Pokemon that I think does match up really well into Terra Fairy Volcarona is Terra Fairy Volcarona, which Pedro did not bring at all in Game 1. But, you know, Volcarona against Volcarona, at best it does neutral damage with Heat Wave, which is already not crazy strong because it's a spread move. And then if one of the Volcarona terastallizes and you force a Fairy Terra, all of a sudden you're now resistant to the Terra Blast, which makes it really difficult for a Terra Fairy Volcarona to break through a non-Terra Fairy Quiver Dance Volcarona.
Absolutely, yeah. We're seeing some quick highlights here. I think Juan won that first game off making some really nice aggressive reads, protecting Volcarona on the double up and then attacking with Terra Blast. And so those are not easy plays to go for because there was a lot that could have gone wrong for him on both of those turns. Evan, I'm going to suggest something crazy, but what about Water Terra Assault Vest Rillaboom to deal with Terra Fairy Volcarona? Now, if you bait out that Terra, suddenly Rillaboom's Woodhammer does a ton of damage, and you don't take that much damage in response.
I like it. I'm on board. I do think that the King Gambit is a bait here.
Yeah.
The King Gambit was able to get basically everything right for it. It got a Defiant boost immediately, and it was able to get a Swords Dance later, but then did nothing. Now, Pedro disagrees, thinks that the King Gambit is still a top threat here, but immediately threatened by Sneasler from the jump as Juan makes a little bit of an adjustment here, gets the Sneasler and Dragonite out. But Pedro now also has the King Gambit and did bring Volcarona this time.
Yeah, so what's really interesting is we're seeing Juan kind of do something similar to Pedro in that first game, which is saying, you know what, I know that you have Fairy Terra on the Dragonite and the Volcarona, but you know, if you Fairy Terra, my Sneasler now does a lot of damage with that Dire Claw, super effective damage. So I like this lead, right, because it's saying I'm going to get some guaranteed damage. I'm either going to force a Terra out or I'm going to be able to just get a skill shot into you.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you can see something similar, which is just protect that Pokemon, but the King Gambit is not exactly applying that much pressure right now. Oh, and here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be the send with the Terra immediately.
Well, also retreating the King Gambit from the field, so Pedro will swap that out for his own Dragonite. So Dragonite and Volcarona up against Sneasler Dragonite on Juan's side. We did already see that the Terastallization will come through for Pedro on the Volcarona. So here is that Terra Fairy Volcarona. I'm wondering how necessary it was to immediately Terra here. You do always have the option of Scale Shot into the Volcarona not being enough, but the close combat actually, Juan has targeted down the King Gambit. Doesn't think that there will be a Terra Fairy at all, which means that Pedro gets a free Quiver Dance off here. A little bit of chip onto that Dragonite will break the multi-scale, which, you know, won't really matter that much if the Dragonite went into that, but covering that incredible call out there from Juan. So Juan now will be able to pick up the KO on the Dragonite on the switch in with the Scale Shot and with the close combat. Covered both options. King Gambit stays in or King Gambit switches out. But you do have to now worry about this Terra Fairy Volcarona that was able to get a Quiver Dance. And I would have traded the King Gambit for that Quiver Dance. I don't know if it's a good trade for the Dragonite there.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, you know, if you trade the King Gambit, you're like, you know, Sucker Punch is not exactly the most effective. I guess what's interesting in this spot is you do pressure Sucker Punch plus Heat Wave into the Sneasler and hope to maybe just knock that out. The Dragonite's not going to be able to do that much damage against either of these Pokemon, but it does have that Haze. So you could just protect Sneasler Haze right now and say, okay, bye-bye to your speed boost and your special attack boost, and here's the protect.
Yeah, let's just reset. Let's all take a deep breath. Sneasler protects itself. Volcarona will go for the Heat Wave. Hits into the protect of the Sneasler.
It's a Dragonite.
So,
okay.
just wait.
I have anxiety watching this,
I know.
There's the
We've all
Haze.
been there. Here comes the Haze from the Dragonite. We'll be able to remove both the speed boost on the Dragonite and the Quiver Dance boost, but because Dragonite is faster than King Gambit, King Gambit actually comes out on top here with the Swords Dance. So King Gambit does have a +2 boost here, but it's still facing down this Sneasler with close combat.
That's right, and so you could go for the Sucker Punch, but if you Sucker Punch the Sneasler, for example, it, you know, has that Focus Sash, you could Sucker Punch Dragonite, but Dragonite could just click Haze again now.
Or Extreme Speed.
Exactly, yeah, and so it's this is to your point about King Gambit, it's really hard for it to thrive in this matchup, right? Like you said, it's had so many turns to get itself going, but when you're up against so many Pokemon that resist, it's just really scary. So we're seeing the Protect Heat Wave option here, but it could just be Dire Claw Extreme Speed right now, or Dire Claw plus Haze. But let's see, did Juan make a hard call out? It is going to be the Extreme Speed coming out. Volcarona takes a lot from that, and the Dire Claw. Juan's reads have just been fantastic.
Yeah. Juan is not afraid of that Swords Dance boosted King Gambit at all, realizing that it's the Terra Fairy Volcarona that could actually cause trouble for his team. And instead, gets that Pokemon off the field. All Volcarona was able to do after the Quiver Dance was get a little bit of chip damage onto the Dragonite. And now that Sneasler with Focus Sash intact, so safe against this King Gambit, able to pick up that KO. Does have to worry about the opposing Sneasler as well. Could have some interesting speed matchups here. We'll have to see how these Pokemon have been trained to see how these Sneasler are going to interact with each other.
Okay, it's finally the Sucker Punch coming out,
Okay.
but it's a lot of work just to get one.
Ooh,
Okay, the
and the
Sneasler
Dire Claw?
just gets
Okay.
Dire Claw, but I mean, Scale Shot from Dragonite here, if it doesn't miss, should just knock out Sneasler, and it's a 3v1 against King Gambit, right? And so let's see. Oh, it's going to be the Haze, though. Okay.
Okay, that's probably the safer play there. No worries about missing a Scale Shot. Able to get the Swords Dance boost away from King Gambit, meaning that the last two Pokemon that Quan has likely able to survive and just feel perfectly fine with the situation they're in, especially with Volcarona in the back, still has Terra active.
Yeah, I am slightly surprised to not see Scale Shot there, but maybe just afraid of missing. However, in doing so, now you do give Sneasler the chance to go for these Dire Claws. And Dire Claw obviously can induce a little bit of variance here with the potential Sleeper Paralysis. If Dragonite had gone for Scale Shot into Sneasler there, well, Sneasler protects, then the King Gambit just feints the close combat, right? Since you've got that Focus Sash intact. So, yeah, I think both options are viable, but I think now Sneasler having this fast Dire Claw is actually quite scary. So let's see.
Ooh, Sucker Punch finally lands, hits into the Dragonite, deals good damage, about 50% there, and the Dire Claw will be able to pick up that KO as well. So Pedro has now brought the Pokemon count even in this game. No boost coming out from the Volcarona, not able to pick up the KO on either the King Gambit or the Sneasler, but actually hit both of the Pokemon this time. Dealt good damage to both. And now it will come down to that final Pokemon. It's the Incineroar.
Okay.
That's actually just going to give a boost to the King Gambit now. And without a Quiver Dance, Volcarona is still slower than Sneasler, but at least you have the fake out pressure.
Yeah, I think here you could probably just fake out Sneasler, Fairy, Terra, Volcarona, just Terra Blast into the King Gambit. This gets around, you know, the Sucker Punches. So we should see Juan, I think, take this game, but it's not over yet. I mean, King Gambit could go for a Protect here. It's still tough.
I mean, the Sneasler's still faster, so...
Yeah. There is still Dire Claw
Intimidate
potential.
down on it now.
Okay, we're just going to see the Protect comes out here. But yeah, I mean, Fairy Terra right now, relatively safe. And the good thing is you get that Intimidate off against the Sneasler as well. So even if it gets a Dire Claw off, shouldn't be too scared. I mean, you could just like fake out Heat Wave here. You could fake out Quiver Dance. You could fake out Terra Blast. A lot of different options. So we'll see which one Juan decides to lock into.
Well, because of the Protects coming out from Pedro, that means the optimal choice... Oh, actually, just on the Sneasler, right? Did not Protect on the King Gambit. So going for the fake out onto Sneasler. Not actually going to be able to deal any damage to that, but the Quiver Dance, making sure that Volcarona will be able to be faster than the Sneasler, get rid of any potential Dire Claw shenanigans, random sleeps, or anything of that nature that you don't want to have happen to any of your Pokemon here. And King Gambit does get another Swords Dance boost, so at +3, does not have the Terastallization available, but still may be able to deal good damage. Probably not enough because of the Fairy typing, though.
Yeah, the question here, I think, is basically, can you get that critical hit? Here we go. +3 Sucker Punch into Volcarona. It is not going to deal enough damage. Does not get the critical hit. No Heat Wave misses here. Terra Blast is going to secure the knockout onto the Sneasler, and we should see Incineroar finish off this game. So, yeah, it was getting a little bit dicey for Juan in the end, but I think he had full control the entire time. He just wanted to ideally not rely on misses. There was just the one opportunity for a critical hit there potentially, but great control of this game. And I love the lead adaptation. I think Juan's predictions in this game were really good, and he was also able to just find these like aggressive double ups. I think the scariest thing about doubling up into a slot is that Pokemon protecting, right? But in this game, we just saw Juan double up into a slot, and both times he was able to successfully knock out the Dragonite as well as the Volcarona. And